Hello traders, Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com on July the 21st, 2019. In this edition of your weekend video newsletter, we'll discuss the indices, all of which staged a reversal on Friday, erasing the gains that we saw on Thursday, which almost looked like we were going to take out all-time highs. The caveat is lower block size volume and lower conviction by institutions. So until that changes, the markets are more suspect on any moves higher. The London Stock Exchange, the FTSE, and the Hang Seng all closed higher. The FANG stocks took a beating last week with the exception of Nvidia, while Intel moved higher and Tesla notched another 5% gain for the week. Bonds are mostly neutral, near highs. The Dow Composite faded the least last week, giving us an indication that transportation stocks and utilities could be turning. That would be a bullish sign for the markets. And we had the S&P 1500 remaining on a buy signal. Institutional sentiment, believe it or not, turned higher towards the end of the week as we saw selling on lower volume. The NIMO and NAMO cycles have peaked and are turning a bit lower, while breadth thrust pulled back to the zero line and took a break last week. Most of our indicators are neutral to slightly bearish to start the week. That said, the total put-call ratio is 1.09. The equity-only put-call ratio was at 0.60, and the index put-call ratio is at 1.42. So there's some mixed signals there, while VIX remains at 1445, and short-term bearish for equities until that changes. VIX VXV did make a bounce. It's back to 0.90, and bullish percent shows that there are still plenty of room to the upside before this last move from the December lows becomes overheated in the long term. We saw the dollar get stuck between the 20 and the 50-day, which tells us that commodities could stay put where they are at the present time. Gold is near highs. The heat map has turned somewhat more red, with strength in transports, materials, industrials, semiconductors, and some retail last week. The international markets have turned more red, with strength in Australia, Taiwan, Brazil, and China persistent. We'll look at some IBD 50 names showing potential and some MarketSmith Growth 250 relative strength scan candidates, as well as some squeeze candidates in yellow. We saw Bukowski's signals change to 4 of 5 red, with his CPI signal mixed red since July the 19th, moving from bullish 79.2% down to 33.3%, with 22 bearish patterns, 11 bullish patterns, and 256 patterns waiting for breakout. Bottom line, we would anticipate that stocks could fade a bit more, so we'll start with a bit of caution on Monday. Okay, so here is the SPY Weekly. We had 2 really nice weeks after the breakout. Buyers stepped up at the lows of the week and price action closed in the upper half of the weekly range. Then came last week, in which case we are still above breakout levels. RSI is still above 50. Volume matched what we saw the previous 2 weeks on the move higher, and MACD remains above the signal line. So SPY looks pretty good to start the week. Renko continues to build white bricks going into Monday, with expectations that the daily price action could come down and test this breakout zone between 295 and 294. As price action stopped right near the lower trend line that extends all the way back to the beginning of June, while tick cumulative rose sharply into the close, which was a bit unusual to say the least. So this chart is a little bit more bearish, obviously, and could test some of these lower levels, some of these gaps down here. But for the most part, RSI on the 60-minute will most likely be oversold if we should see a lower start for Monday. The same can be said for the NASDAQ, as we did pull back to the previous breakout zone. We do have some Fibonacci zone here just to keep track of any pullbacks. That said, RSI is above 50. Volume matched what we saw the previous week, and MACD remains above its signal line. Price action, for the most part, isn't wide and loose, which is what you would normally see in a bearish reversal. It was actually fairly well contained, with the stocks suffering negative reversals, including Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. While the volume actually fell on both major exchanges, that was pretty notable considering Friday was an options expiration day, which normally boosts volume like we saw back here in the third week of June. And note how we recovered while moving higher into the third quarter and second half. Also note the S&P 1500, the big cap 500, mid cap 400, small cap 600 remains on a buy signal confirmed by histogram and price action at the 20-period moving average. Also note the New York Stock Exchange, price removed, only moving averages. The 50-period moving average is rising again. 200-day is flat. MACD is above its signal line and rising, while the New York Stock Exchange new highs minus new lows remains above the zero line with the moving average climbing. We also see the New York Stock Exchange advanced decline a bit flat at highs. In addition, the Wilshire 5000, a broad measure of market participation, continues to show a fade on the Copak curve. So this is slightly more bearish and indicating we could come back to that 30,000 level in the short term. And finally, we have the Dow Composite, which presents something of a caveat for the bears and the bulls. If we do continue to move lower, obviously, we have major support down below. So the bears have to push this pretty hard to get price action down below the moving averages, and this major support zone, RSI, remains above 50. There is no divergence. Price action moved higher with RSI. And though we did see higher volume on Friday, it didn't match what we saw at the end of the month to end the first half, like we just discussed. And MACD remains above its signal line, producing higher highs and higher lows. Stochastic is headed towards oversold. That would turn shortly. So basically, the Dow Jones Composite, 65 stocks in the industrials, transportation, and utilities group, if this should turn higher, this would probably surprise many people that are just looking at the major exchanges like the S&P 500. As such, it's something we need to pay particular attention to this week. As the Dow Airlines Index broke out, did fail. We're looking for a bounce there. In addition, we saw trucking stocks potentially breaking out. Look at the volume. Look at MACD. Looking like that could continue higher. Caveat, the rails, we have mixed results there, with CSX reporting, Norfolk Southern reporting this week. We're looking at Union Pacific and Kansas City Southern as potential trades, in addition to a 13-year downtrend breakout on the Baltic Dry Index. I noted a number of stocks that look good in the Saturday Post, so make sure you check that out going into the week. The bond stock ratio between the 10-year and the S&P 500 is neutral. The 65 period is flat. The ratio continues to oscillate above and below, while TLT weekly remains in a consolidation pattern. You note that we had already rebalanced our portfolio, taken some bonds off. We still have exposure slightly below 40%, as we are expecting these extremes on the 10-year yield to turn, while high-yield corporate debt and junk bonds, which look similar by the way, remain in a bullish trend, higher highs, higher lows, above the 20-period, RSI above 50, hanging out at the highs as we consolidate. It didn't fall off like you would expect to see if the S&P 500 or the spiders were to follow through, you expect to see this dropping below the 20 period and leading the markets like they usually do. So right now, high yield and junk bonds aren't giving us a signal, and bonds are neutral. The British pound US dollar pair is continuing this trend lower, which is bullish for the London Stock Exchange and the FTSE, while the US dollar remains fixed between the 50-day, the green line, and the 200-day magenta. RSI is oscillating around 50. No idea if this is going to push higher. If it does, that would be bearish for gold. If it pushes lower, look for gold to break out, as it appeared to do on Thursday, then reversed on Friday. This is one of the reasons why we took KL off, Kilo Lima. The Kirkland Lake gold position, we took profits off the table at Friday highs. In addition, we see support zone for copper much higher on Friday. Looks like it's going to turn and continue in its bullish trend off of this recent double bottom on above average volume. MACD is above its signal line. Watch copper. This is a leading economic indicator. As we saw back in 2009 when the current secular bull market started, copper started rising rapidly, while in 2016 we saw a similar push. We do have pivots overhead, and if you're bullish, you want to see that continue this time and break out above this upper trend line. So make sure you keep your ears peeled for improving economic conditions that would spill over into the equity market. And finally, crude oil and West Texas crude, which is correlated with the equity market. If you're bullish equities, you want to see crude oil moving higher, not lower like we saw last week. And if you're bearish, you want to see this roll over. That would indicate a short-term bearish trend might continue in the U.S. equity market. The heat map has shown a change of color, indicating we could be rotating through a cycle. Red from left to right along the top margin. You see the dates. Every Friday this is updated. We have a few more red indications. Pause the video and check out those sectors that were weak. Real estate, healthcare, and aerospace. Also watch the international markets, which showed a lot more red. Strength was noted in the opening monologue in Brazil, Australia, and China, so that you can position accordingly going into this week. Here is the IBD 50 for the week. The first thing I noticed was there were only 10 stocks that finished green on the week. The rest were red. As such, that's telling us to exercise a bit of caution. Starting Monday, we're looking for stocks that are above the ascending 20 and 50-day moving averages, maybe just retested like Amazon going into this week. Arista Networks, which is at highs. Baozun, which gave us a nice trade last week as well. Thursday and Friday reversal. Looking for it to push above the 20-day moving average this week and follow through. Look at RSI, indications that we might see a continuation. Don't automatically assume it's going to move higher. Watch the markets, how they open on Monday morning. And definitely wait until after the opening range, 10 to 10:15, most likely when I'll start to look at potential longs. Baozun looks pretty good though. Other stocks like Cadence Design, CDNS came back to the 20-day. We're looking for a bounce there. What I'm looking for this week is stocks that are pulling back to the moving average, show signs of a follow-through like CDW, looking for a bounce here as well. If we start to see buyers step up on Monday, that would be a good sign that we are about to retest the highs. It's been in a bullish trend. It's above its 20-day. Each time it pulls back, that was the best opportunity to get in. The follow-through day was the confirmation. Again, right here, the follow-through day confirmation, while RSI remains above 50. Comcast and stocks in the communications sector continue to trend lower on Netflix earnings. CPRT, we took profits on this one after a move from 2 weeks ago, Wednesday breakout. This one gave us a nice gain. We took that position off. We're looking for stocks in the XLF sector like Discover Financial to continue to move higher. Noted pull back to the 20-day, followed through. Looks like it's going to break out this week, maybe continue along its bullish trend. Above the 20-day, RSI above 50, volume increasing, though it does have earnings in 2 days. Discovery Networks, this one also looks interesting. Pull back to the 20-day, looking for a follow through. This would be showing relative strength. It is in the communications sector with Netflix and Comcast. So at a minimum, like here and here and here, we need to see a follow through day first. If we start to see that initial entry, maybe you take a quarter position. That's what we're thinking anyway. And then on Tuesday, if we still see a follow through, we can add to our position, assuming that this trend will continue as RSI remains above 50, and each pullback being bought as a result. HXL, previous watch list, looking pretty interesting as well. Bullish trend, RSI above 50. Look for a follow through day. After earnings, we have earnings in 1 day. Looking for a bounce. This is in the aerospace and defense group. Note annual sales and earnings, A's and B's in high 90s on the composite, and EPS rating near 90. We want to see these kind of qualities in any stock that we're taking, as institutions will continue to buy shares, though now we will wait until after earnings. Depending on what happens with gold, we could get back into Kirkland Lake. We'll have to wait and see what happens. We're extended. We're at the ATR2 bands. We could push a bit higher. RSI is showing muscle, overbought. Volume has been pretty good. So if gold presses higher, we might get back in this. We were thinking that this is going to roll over and come back and test this previous breakout zone, potentially for a re-entry there. Loulou might pull back as well. Keep an eye on that one. All of these stocks in the top panel are bullish. PagSeguro, that one got some mention on Friday on CNBC. Paycom pulling back. PayPal looks like it's going to set up. If we get a bounce off of the 20-day, look for that follow-through day as RSI remains above 50. On a bounce, RSI would turn eventually. Just keep an eye on that as a confirmation. PaySign and the prepaid card services group, this one continues to press higher. We got into this one back here when it broke out of this base and kept adding to it. We took some profits into this strength as relative strength line continues to climb. We've been in and out of this one on a day trading basis as well. Annual sales and earnings climbing, A's and B's, EPS rating of 93, composite rating 99. These are the type of numbers that you want to see. Looking for a follow through. Doesn't report until the second week of August. RealPage and ServiceNow both pulling back towards the 20-period moving average. ServiceNow tagged it on Friday. Again, we're looking for bounces on these IBD 50 stocks. A failure and a break below these levels, RSI drops below 50, would be a sign that the markets are most likely already heading lower to start this week. While RealPage looks like it's building a cup with handle pattern, a breakout would be a continuation. Use the depth of the cup as your targets. While the breakout might be timed around an earnings run, maybe we see a push. Reports at the end of the month. Nice annual sales and earnings. EPS rating 92, A's and the metrics here, and a composite rating of 97. Big cup and handle, looking for a breakout of this smaller cup and handle and a continuation on RealPage. The company provides on-demand software for managing, screening, and leasing and the accounting of new rental housing and the rental housing industry. Twitter pulled back to the 20 period. Ulta is pulling back as well. Ubiquity Networks flat above its 20 period moving average. Viva pulling back to its 20 period as well. Xilinx continues along its bullish trend and looking like that could continue coming into this week as well. Looking for Xilinx and Nvidia to continue higher. With Xilinx reporting this week, I might be scaling out, hopefully into a nice little bullish continuation. Additional stocks that showed up on scans this week: CFG looking pretty interesting. CTVA, a new IPO. Note the annual sales and earnings are increasing. We still don't have enough information for the fundamental side of the ledger. Freeport-McMoRan looking for a push above. Remember, copper is looking bullish. Look for Freeport to continue higher, break through the 200-day as the company reports in 3 days. Additional stocks together with the transports group, which looks really strong. JBHT, JB Hunt looking for a follow through. I'm not interested in chasing it. Many of you took this on the reversal candle last week. Leastar, I believe, and Susie as well. Looking for a flag at a minimum below this pivot somewhere to get into it. This bullish trend will most likely continue as transports are very strong. Make sure you read the Saturday post that I uploaded that goes into more detail as to why we think these things, as to why we have this bullish thesis. Kansas City Southern also popped on earnings. Nice little beat there. Looking for a follow through. Gap back above the 20-day. If we get above this level and you start to see additional volume on top of what we saw Thursday and Friday, that would be indications of institutions. It takes them days and weeks to fill positions. So if you see a follow through on KSU, this is most likely going to continue in the short term. So make a note of it for Monday trading. Charles Schwab and some of the broker dealers are looking better. Annual sales and earnings are climbing. A's and B's on the metrics, high 90s, looking good there. Above average volume on the break higher. Look for a move through the 200-day. Most likely flags underneath it to begin with, as broker dealers are looking a little better, as we can see with E-Trade already testing the 200-day moving average, having reported earnings last week. State Street Bank also looking good, follow through. What I'd like to see now is a flag at some point. RSI is probably going to be overbought on Monday and Tuesday. Look for a flag. This one's most likely going to build the right side of a cup. Longer term view on STT, having reported earnings last week. Looking for a follow through and get back to the 100 level at some point over the next several months. This might be a nice trade for you traders that want to swing trade and position trade in the financial group, looking for strength that usually shows up in the second half. Do note annual sales and earnings and the IBD metrics before making any decisions. Some of the squeeze candidates on the opening monologue. This one moved higher last week from the 82 zone. Robert was looking at this one as well. This showed up on the TTM squeeze. Looking for a trigger, I believe, which we saw on Friday. eBay post earnings giving us the opportunity to get back in. If this starts to follow through on Monday, this Bollinger Band trigger will most likely continue in the bullish direction. You get a nice breakout. Big flat base on base pattern. Looking for a follow through this week and into the second half of the year. Kraft Heinz, KHC, also showing signs that this TTM is about to trigger. Looking for a follow through as RSI continues to rise above 50, suggesting potential bullish follow through. Nucor Steel also looking like it's going to continue higher. Many of the steel stocks look good. Here's AKS Steel, a cheaper version. Doesn't usually get above 4 to 6, so just keep that in mind short term. Just using these for confirmation. US Steel looking for a follow through as well. Bollinger Bands are fairly tight. The stock that many people are not talking about is Steel Dynamics, of course. This one looks really good. Nice bullish trend. Looking for a bullish follow through as RSI remains above 50. Okay, traders, that's going to do it for me. This is Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com with your weekend video newsletter. Looking for indications which direction we might be moving this week. So open the week with a bit of caution. With the exception of the watch list group we just covered, we'll be sending out the list that we're thinking about trading around 11:30 tonight, 8:30 on the West Coast. So make sure you check your inbox for that. Otherwise, have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. I hope this helps.